Hello everyone, today we are starting the story of a Goblin Chad who grows stronger every time he claps with a girl. This guy has luck as he reaps double benefits from clapping. Please hit like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. So let's get started. Darkness enveloped the damp cave, and the sound of terrifying screams echoed through the walls. The goblins were celebrating the death of their leader. One goblin with bloodshot red eyes went mad and declared himself the new leader. However, his comrade disagreed, believing that he had done the most work and should be the leader instead. Filled with envy and rage, he charged at his comrade, biting into the other's nose. The cave was now filled with chaos. Screams rang out more violently. Other goblins gathered around, watching the battle with amusement and betting on who would win. It was their favorite pastime. Chaos brought endless joy to these simple souls. However, amidst the excitement, they discussed bringing the prey out to satisfy their desires. Because the old leader had hidden a human girl and had not touched her yet, they started whispering to each other, plotting to find and take her for themselves. Some goblins hesitated because the prey was protected by a different goblin. He was unlike the other goblins, while other goblins wore simple clothes to cover their private parts. He had covered himself with tattered clothes that covered almost his entire body, and his appearance was terrifying, not only because of his clothes but also because of the aura he exuded like a human being. And when the leader died, they believed that this different one would keep the prey for himself. They stared at the strange goblin. They would follow him and snatch the girl when they had the chance. Some smarter goblins, they suggested waiting a little longer because their strongest members had gone ahead to find the prey. They were planning to let the strange goblin fight those guys, then take advantage of the chaos to kill him and finally take the prey for themselves. However, they didn't expect the strange goblin to be able to hear their conversation. Knowing that the girl was in danger, the strange goblin decided to run back to where she was being held captive. With his speed, he easily lost the other goblins. When he arrived at the location, he was horrified to find the rebellious goblins ready to violate the girl. The girl begged for help, her eyes wide with fear. He spoke to them, telling them to release the girl. The leading goblin and refused this request. The leader was dead. He felt like he was the strongest goblin in the group and this prey was his. The strange goblin didn't care about that. He was determined to protect this girl. Seeing this, the big goblin and his henchmen decided to attack and kill the strange goblin. Outnumbered, the strange goblin was quickly subdued, but he didn't give up. He didn't believe that these low-level goblins could defeat him, and more importantly, he didn't want to die here. Seizing the opportunity, he used his weapon to kill the biggest goblin, causing the others to fear. Never before had a goblin used a sharp weapon and attacked like a human being. The strange goblin pointed his weapon at the rest. His words were emotionless, "Leave or die." These words and the image of the giant being killed quickly frightened them. The remaining goblins fled, not forgetting to shout threats. It would return with reinforcements to take him down. When the other goblins left, but the strange goblin still wasn't letting his guard down. Trying to regain his composure, he knew that this was just the beginning of the hellish days to come when he decided to fight against his own kind. This girl's name was Kelia. She supported him and thanked him for saving her once again. She could tell that he was different from the other goblins. He had never harmed her. She hoped he wouldn't die. It is true that a goblin would never protect a human, but there was a deeper reason for the strange goblin's actions. You guessed it right, he was a human a few days ago. Lin died in a terrible accident. He didn't expect that instead of meeting God after being hit by a truck, he was transferred to another world with a system. However, his system wasn't fully activated yet. Besides being able to see some stats, it didn't seem to have any other functions, and it seemed quite useless. But since meeting Kelly, she told him about the role of those stats in this world. This world was ruled by gods with many powerful monsters, and humans had demonstrated their role on this continent through absolute power. Unfortunately, the goblin he was reborn as was the weakest and dirtiest monster in this world, and his stats were extremely low, so he would be easily killed by his own kind. Currently, he was level 5, HP 20, Strength 5, Defense 5, and these stats gave him an overall strength of 30. Luckily, his name didn't change. He was still Lin. However, there was still a way for him to become stronger here, and that was through mating with girls. In this harsh reality, goblins were capable of becoming stronger through constant mating and procreation. However, they do not have a female gender, so they could only mate with other female creatures. That's why goblins constantly plundered and kidnapped women. Lin, a former human, found doing so completely against his morals. But to survive, he had to be stronger. This issue always worried him. Seeing Lin's worry, the girl told him not to think too much after spending days with him. She knew that he was completely different from the other goblins and really didn't want to live with them. With a hopeful smile, she promised that when the knights came to rescue her, she would tell them about how he saved her. Because the knights were always fair and just, they would surely agree to let him live in her village. Her optimism gave Lamthian hope. He believed what she said. He was full of hope, even if the system couldn't activate immediately. As long as he persevered until the humans came to rescue them and gained the protection of humans, he could survive. Then he could slowly figure out a way to fully activate the system. However, things weren't as easy as Lamthian had hoped. A scream, a sign of the goblins returning to them. Without hesitation, he ordered Kelia to hide, and she obeyed. Immediately, the first goblin appeared. It charged wildly at Lamthian, screaming that humans had appeared, and that it wanted to mate with the girl to become stronger, because it knew that once it became stronger, it wouldn't be killed. The goblin ran frantically looking for Kelia. However, its haste made it an easy target for Lamthian, who quickly killed the unfortunate goblin. Lamthian quickly informed Kelia that humans were here to save her. Kelia's face lit up with joy. She assumed it was a knight. She said she would go out to check. Lamthian looked at her with concern. The appearance of a knight meant Kelia would be saved and perhaps an opportunity for him to prove his worth. But his excitement was stifled when he saw a knight easily killing the other goblins with his strength. The knight wasn't putting in much effort to deal with the goblins. This human seemed to be venting his anger, clearly complaining that these filthy creatures had ripped his clothes. Seeing the human's stats, Lamthian was incredibly surprised. His name was Loader, level 25 with strength 30 and defense 50, equipped with platinum armor and an iron sword with a total power of 400. This was the highest stat Lamthian had seen since coming to this world, making him question if Loader was actually human. While Lamthian stood in place, amazed at how easily the human dealt with the goblins, Kelia excitedly approached, addressing Loader, delighted to see him. However, Lamthian quickly noticed that Loader was raising his sword to attack Kelia. With quick reflexes, he pushed her away from the attack just in time. Despite saving Kelia from death, the sudden attack baffled Lamthian. The Holy Knights were supposed to be here to save people. Why were they attacking Kelia? He assumed that because the cave was quite dark, he had mistaken the girl for a goblin. But that didn't seem to be the case, as Loader angrily expressed his disdain for a goblin having dodged his attack. Kelia quickly tried to explain she was a human, but Loader told her to be silent, because he knew who she was. However, he believed she had been defiled by the goblins, and might even be pregnant with their child. It was laughable to him that someone as filthy as her would expect mercy from him. It would be better for her if she repented her sins and paid for them with death. Kelia begged him, insisting that even though she was captured, she hadn't been defiled by the goblins. Then she pointed to Lamthian, explaining that he was the one who had protected her. But unfortunately, Loader didn't believe a word she said. The idea that a goblin had saved her and wasn't a human enemy was beyond the bounds of a believable story. He raised his sword to end her. Lamthian couldn't believe what he was seeing. He didn't expect things to end so quickly. With no other choice, Lamthian stepped forward, without hesitation pushing Kelia aside and facing Loader. He hoped there would be enough time for Kelia to escape. Lamthian grabbed his crude weapon and lunged at Loader. This was an outcome he hadn't expected, but even if he had to sacrifice himself, he wanted to protect the girl. This could be the act that would prove he was once human. But before the collision, an aura enveloped Lamthian, leaving both him and Loader astonished. This magic came from a woman dressed in white. Her aura exuded holiness and solemnity. She demanded Loader stop because she felt this goblin was strange. This woman was none other than the Saint Ephra. Seizing the opportunity, Kelia crawled over and begged her to save them. Ephra helped Kelia to her feet and presented her to Loader, who had tried to kill her just minutes ago. Then Ephra turned her attention to Lamthian and asked if he could understand what she was saying. Lamthian was trapped within the barrier. According to what Kelia had told him, Ephra was the saint and the spokesperson for the divine temple. She could be his only hope of leaving this place alive. Lamthian quickly responded that he could understand. He took a deep breath and kept saying he wasn't a monster of this world and he used to be human, but he became this way due to an accident. He could explain everything if she took him along. While Loader thought this goblin was just a bit smarter than the others, Ephra smiled. Goblins are usually stupid and lowly creatures. They can't think or speak fluently, but this goblin can speak, and this might be a blessing from the Holy Mother. The holy woman Ephra turned to Kelia and asked her to confirm if this goblin really didn't hurt her. Kelia happily confirmed that Lamthian not only didn't hurt her, but he protected her from other goblins and gave her food. This pleased Ephra. She realized the strangeness of the goblin. She decided to take it back to the temple and study it thoroughly before making any decision. Hearing this, Kelia was very happy because she fulfilled her promise to the goblin. Ephra then turned to Lamthian and asked if he was willing to go with them. Hearing this, Lamthian was very happy. He immediately replied that he was willing. Finally, everything seemed to be getting better for Lamthian because he was with someone who could listen and understand reason. With a snap of her fingers, Ephra quickly broke the barrier that imprisoned Lamthian. Then she ordered everyone to prepare to leave. Lamthian felt a sense of safety about his future, which he was incredibly grateful for. So he immediately approached Ephra to express his gratitude, promising that he would repay her. But as he looked closer at her face, he noticed a cruel smile that took him by surprise. The next thing he heard was a sound he was all too familiar with, a sound of metal-piercing flesh. He knew what was happening, but he turned back in fear. The fear was immediately confirmed. Kelia was killed. The lifeless body lay motionless on the cold ground. Lam Thin was stunned, unable to move. The shock was too great. Just as he thought things were getting better, it turned out to be a cruel lie. At this moment, the voice of the woman he thought was the savior rang out along with the cruel laughter. She mocked his naivety and said that his willingly following her was the best way to repay her, and Lam Thin understood the cruel reality of this world. A week has passed in the village. The bell tolls, summoning everyone to the town square. As they gather, Loder addresses the assembled villagers, announcing the devastating goblin attack on Bright Town. This incites fury among the villagers. They demand blood for blood, seeing humans and goblins as sworn enemies, exactly the reaction Loder had hoped for. After whipping up their hatred, Loder begins to praise the temple. The knights, he explains, acting on the temple's behalf, have slain these goblins and avenged the villagers. Then the holy maiden Ephra steps forward. With her powers, she creates a dazzling spectacle, urging the villagers to continue praying to the temple. She assures them that the temple will always protect its faithful. Her words instantly sway the villagers. Even those previously skeptical, their faith is reignited, and they turn to the temple with devotion and trust. Later, Ephra returns to her chambers, basking in the success of her speech. It's nothing new. These villagers are the most gullible fools imaginable. They'll pray even harder, worship the temple more fervently, and bring her more offerings. Her smug satisfaction is abruptly interrupted by a voice calling her name. The person who called her name was the goblin Lam Thin. He has regained consciousness, and it's clear he's been through hell. Horrifying scars cover his body, and one eye has been gouged out despite his injuries. A burning rage burns in his eye. Ephra ignores his words. A twisted smile plays on her lips. She's amazed by his tenacious spirit. It's been a long time since she'd seen such tenacious life. Perhaps this is why the temple hasn't been able to eradicate all goblins from the continent. Lam Thin's return to consciousness excites Ephra. She can continue her experiments, observing how the poison affects him. Lam Thin, enraged, repeats his accusations. You tricked me, you killed Kelia. Is this the true face of your temple, the so-called justice humans boast about? His fury is met with Ephra's cruel indifference. She silences him with a sharp thrust of a staff against his mouth. She laughs, mocking his anger. How dare a weak, filthy creature like you, degenerate goblin, speak of human justice? She claims Kelia was under a spell and dared to speak for him. A betrayal, therefore, death was her final act of loyalty. Goblins are nothing more than insects on this continent, she continues. It's a great honor that the Holy Maiden even speaks to you. Be grateful and use your wretched little body to serve mankind and the temple's experiments. The brutal torture continues, Lam Thin helpless to resist the endless, unbearable pain. Even when he falls unconscious, he's quickly awakened by the torment. In his torture, he wonders if he'll die here. He doesn't want to. But he can't blame anyone but himself. He was so foolish. Reborn as a lowly goblin, he had naively believed in humans and the kindness of those not of his kind. His weakness and naivety led to Kelia's death. After he was captured by the villagers, Loder and Ephra tortured and tormented him with every imaginable cruelty. They never believed his words, taking sick pleasure in his suffering. Lam Thin's suffering eventually comes to an end. He's tortured to death by the cruel woman. His only wish in his final moments, if he had another chance, was to never trust humans again. If he could do it again, he'd crush their bones and drink their blood, but that was only if he could be reborn. As his consciousness fades, instead of drifting into an endless void, Lam Thin awakens in a different space, a place filled with brilliant white light and twinkling stars. His body is fully healed. Before he can ask where he is, a system window appears. It informs him that the Goblin Life Simulation system has been activated and he has died. A brief summary of his life flashes before him. Due to your naivety, you forgot you were a goblin. Humans will never trust goblins. You died from torture and abuse. This pain will be engraved in your mind and you will never forget. As a result, you're the most tragic character in the rebirth system. Do you want to start again, yes or no? Lam Thin is startled. His system only activated when he died, and this system might allow him to be reborn. But will he be reborn as a low-level goblin this time? The system reminds him if you choose no, your soul will completely dissipate. If you choose yes, you will be reborn into a goblin body 1 week earlier. This made him incredibly excited. A week ago, this was his chance for revenge. He had to get revenge on Loder and Ephra. Of course, he chose to be reborn again. A white light enveloped his body, signaling the start of his Goblin 2.0 life. Lam Thin's eyes were now filled with rage. This rebirth was slightly different because this was his Goblin 2.0 life. To help him live longer, the system decided to give him a little more power. Feeling his strength, Lanthan smiled with satisfaction. Even if it was just a little, coming back to life was the most important thing. But it seemed this was his only chance because the system immediately warned him of danger. People from the temple were coming, and if he died again, he wouldn't be reborn. This shocked him, but he didn't expect more. Being reborn once was already a miracle. He wasn't strong enough to fight the temple yet, so he immediately asked the system what he could do. The system explained that it was called the Goblin Life Simulation System. It could simulate his life and predict future events. Each different choice would lead to different outcomes. Each simulation required 24 hours to complete. After the simulation, he would earn points from each simulation, which he could use to exchange for items in the system. This made Lanthan chuckle. This simulation method meant he could see the future, so he immediately started using the simulation. The system reminder displayed the current situation. Escape the Goblin Cave. To escape, he had to make choices. 1. Warn his goblin friends and unite to face the humans. The reward would be 10 points. 2. Abandon the other goblins and escape on his own. The reward would be 5 points. 3. Hide in the cave and pray the temple people don't find him. The reward would be 0 points. Lanthan thought about it. Even though there were 3 options, he was sure that even if all the goblins in the cave united, they couldn't defeat Loader. The battle would end with their deaths, and he wouldn't be able to escape. But he still chose to simulate the first option. He hoped that with the points he earned, he could exchange for a weapon from the shop and he could kill Loader with a sneak attack. As predicted, after the simulation, all the goblins were killed. The result was a complete failure. The system asked him to think carefully when making decisions and also gave him 10 points. Lanthan was happy that he got the points. Even though his plan failed, he quickly opened the system's shop. Many weapons appeared immediately, and he could exchange for them. But the problem was that his points were too low. The only thing he could exchange for was a short knife. It could increase his movement speed by 10% and his strength by 15 points. He grabbed the knife. Those stats were immediately added to his information panel. At this point, Lanthan remembered Kelia. He asked why he didn't see her. The system informed him that due to his rebirth, some events in this world had changed. Kelia wasn't captured by the goblins. She was living happily with her family and the village. Knowing this made Lanthan very happy. A smile appeared on his face. He felt he had fulfilled his promise to bring her home now. He had no worries on his path to revenge. The thing to do now was to escape and survive. He chose a narrow exit to go out. This place was small, so there would definitely be fewer guards. There were only 2 guards outside. They were discussing their work. These goblins were very weak, so they could easily complete their task. Lanthan heard their conversation. He carefully advanced to the entrance of the cave. The 2 guards talked to each other. Since this passage was small, any goblin that ran out would be easy to kill. Loader had asked them to kill any girl who ran out and not let them return to the village. This conversation confirmed Lanthan's belief that everyone in the temple was a bunch of bastards who were willing to kill their own people. Therefore, a goblin like him had no reason to be merciful to them. Lanthan pinched his nose, trying his best to imitate a woman's voice of distress, and pleaded for help. The guards immediately paid attention to it. They wanted to kill the girl and receive a reward from Loader. One of them entered the cave with a knife behind his back. He told the girl not to be afraid. He was a temple man, and he was here to take everyone home. But instead of a woman, it was Lanthan with a sharp knife pointed at the knight. At the exit, the knight noticed the strange behavior of his comrade and decided to check on him. As he approached, he was shocked to see a goblin standing there. In a flash, Lanthan threw the knight's body away and then charged toward the terrified knight at incredible speed. His agility allowed him to easily wound the knight, who fell to the ground in pain. The knight, overcome with fear, screamed, "You can speak human." Lanthan's sharp steel blade was the only answer to the knight's fear. Knowing he was no match for Lanthan's power, the knight realized he was facing death. In desperation, he begged for mercy. He knelt, pleading for compassion, and showed Lanthan a picture of his family, hoping for a chance to return to them. He praised Lanthan's intelligence, claiming he would understand that he was merely following the orders of the temple. He insisted that he was forced into doing what he did. The knight offered Lanthan a bag of gold and a beautiful woman, promising to select the most alluring one for him. However, for a man like Lanthan who had been betrayed, these words only fueled his anger. The knight's true nature was exposed. He had planned to use Lanthan's hesitation to kill him. But it was all part of Lanthan's plan. He swiftly and coldly ended the knight's life. Lanthan felt pity for the man's family, but he understood that sometimes ruthlessness was necessary. Evil needed to be eradicated, especially now that he was no longer human. His attention was drawn to a voice coming from the forest. It was Loader and his men heading towards them. Lanthan quickly took off the knight's clothes and left in a hurry, promising to find Loader and Ephra soon. Later, Loder and Ephra arrived at the scene. They were stunned to find the bodies of the two temple knights. After examining the bodies, Loder suspected the goblin ambush. The clean, swift cuts were unusual. Ephra thought it was impossible for a regular goblin to kill both knights. She believed a goblin capable of such a feat must be a mutated one. Loder agreed with her assessment. He was furious that the knights could not handle a mutated goblin, and allowing it to escape was a bad sign. Loder, furious, kicked one of the corpses and raged that these knights couldn't handle a mutated goblin. Ephra, her lips licking, couldn't control her excitement and cruelty at the thought of obtaining such a unique specimen for experimentation. Night fell, and the moonlight cast an eerie glow on the forest. Lamthine panted heavily, happy to be alive. He had run until exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to let his guard down. He tried to recover as quickly as possible to continue his journey. He realized that they hated goblins so much, so he would use the goblin way to deal with them. Goblins could upgrade their attributes through mating and cannibalism, both increasing strength and creating stronger generations. Lanathane's mind was consumed with hatred. In this life, he wanted all men to experience only the happiness of death and all women to kneel and weep at his feet, especially Loder and Ephra. But his thoughts were interrupted by the rustling of leaves. He grew worried, thinking it was one of Loder's henchmen still pursuing him. He decided to strike first to gain an advantage without hesitation. Lamthine stood up and charged at his opponent. The unexpected appearance of Lamthine shocked and frightened the stranger, who stumbled backward. Lamthine was shocked to find that this was a goblin. The sound it made him think that it could speak. Inertia made Lamthine also fall forward. After recovering his posture, Lamthine was surprised to find that this goblin had characteristics of a female. Why was a female goblin appearing at this time according to everyone's knowledge? Goblins were only male, reproduced by mating with other creatures. Her presence had changed Lamthine's entire perception. In confusion, his eyes were fixed on the female goblin. She thought he was about to do something. She quickly sat up and begged him not to hurt her, explaining that she was just fetching water. This only made Lamthine more worried. How could this goblin speak complete sentences like him? To find the answer, he used his assessment skill to check her attributes. She was level 3, but her profession was God's messenger. She had the titles of Fallen God, Pure Soul, with attributes Blood 10, Energy 2, Defense 1, with the skills of Devour and Wild Growth. Her overall strength was 10. And Lamthine was surprised to see the special note. When a male goblin combines with a female goblin, it will become the legendary goblin god. This made Lamthine have an unclean thought, because if he mated with her, he would have immense power. As if seeing the dark thoughts in Lamthine's eyes, the girl backed away in fear. She said she was caught by the patriarch to fetch water. If she didn't bring the water back, she would be beaten to death by the patriarch. Seeing the girl scared, Lamthine spoke up and apologized. He said he didn't mean to scare her. He also patted her shoulder to comfort her, saying that if she cried, it would attract the attention of bad people. But the girl didn't care for Lamthine's actions. She was concerned about why Lamthine could also speak in a complete way like her. Her eyes lit up with excitement. Lamthine laughed and nodded. Because of her cuteness, this was reasonable, because ordinary goblins couldn't speak, and maybe she rarely talked to other people in the tribe. However, Lamthine's line of thought was once again interrupted. He noticed the girl was clinging to his cloak. She said Lamthine was good, because the other goblins just beat her up. This was the first time a goblin treated her like this. The girl suggested that Lamthine return to her tribe with her. This surprised Lamthine. He didn't expect there to be a goblin tribe nearby. He still didn't know if the Loder people were chasing them. It wasn't suitable to ABC right now, and he needed to find a safe place to hide. Lamthine's eyes lit up. This was a good opportunity for him to recruit his first followers. Right after that, he suggested that the girl take him to her tribe. The girl agreed without blushing. It seems because this was the first time she met a goblin as handsome as this, she immediately agreed to take him to her camp. Soon after they arrived at the goblin camp, Lamthine's appearance made the other goblins extremely wary, because he was a stranger and dressed like a human, something goblins had never seen before. Lamthine calmly observed. With the number of goblins here, he felt very satisfied, and he decided to start building his kingdom from here. With a calm attitude, he explained to the goblins that he wanted to join them, and he wanted to meet their leader. But this proposal was immediately rejected. That he decided that a freak like Lamthine couldn't meet the patriarch, that he decided to capture Lamthine and then bring him to see the patriarch. At this time, the girl worriedly stepped forward to block the goblins. She said that Lamthine was a good person. The commotion had attracted the patriarch's attention. He inquired about the situation. His appearance surprised Lamthine a little. The patriarch's name was an old goblin with a staff decorated with many skulls. He looked very ferocious. His appearance was completely different from the goblins Lamthine had seen before. Besides his clothes, he also had very high stats, with level 25, priest profession, blood 102, mana 29, defense 17, with the skills of Devour, Summon, Thorn Control. The equipment is skull staff and bone chains, and has an overall strength of 200. Lamthin's eyes lit up with vigilance. He didn't expect there to be such a strong goblin in this tribe. The goblin leader, after appearing, slowly walked towards Lamthin. He looked at the female goblin, asking if she had brought the stranger back to the camp. The girl, filled with worry, confirmed that she had brought Lamthin to the camp, explaining that he had nowhere else to go. With his terrifying red eyes, the leader praised the girl for doing a good job. But then, to her surprise, he ordered other goblins to grab Lamthin, intending to kill and eat him. The goblins, excited at the prospect of a meal, jumped up in glee. They pushed the girl aside and pointed their weapons at Lamthin. Lamthin immediately pulled out his weapon, commanding them to stop. He claimed to have the ability to create weapons and that joining their tribe would make them stronger. The iron knife in his hand immediately caught the leader's attention. He quickly ordered the other goblins to stop and rush towards Lamthin. He brought his nose close to Lamthin's face, claiming that he smelled deception on him. However, he also wanted to know what kind of weapons Lamthin could create. Using his knowledge of modern technology, Lamthin explained that he could make weapons out of iron, provided they could find iron ore. He promised that with enough time, he could create weapons more powerful than the knife. He thought to himself, this goblin shaman could speak very clearly. It seemed the higher the level of the goblin, the more intelligent they were, seeing the leader's hesitation. Lamthin emphasized that with iron weapons, the tribe would have a chance to win against humans or other monsters. The goblins began to discuss, acknowledging that possessing iron weapons would be incredibly beneficial. They felt that goblins, compared to humans, were weak creatures, but with iron weapons, they could move north to snatch girls for mating. Faced with the immense benefits of iron weapons, the leader agreed to give Lamthin a chance. He demanded that Lamthin find iron ore and create weapons within 3 days, or he would be eaten. Not only him, but the female goblin would be eaten too. Hearing this, the girl became extremely worried. After giving his demands, the leader and the goblin horde left. Comforting the girl, Lamthin looked towards the leader with a hint of anger. He silently judged the leader as a cruel person, willing to kill even members of his own tribe when enraged. Lamthin suppressed his anger, knowing that he couldn't defeat the leader with his current strength. He needed to use this time to create weapons and become stronger. The next day at dawn, Lamthin led the goblins in the tribe to search for iron ore. It was now night, and the moonlight made the forest seem frightening. The female goblin, Gobu, was also with him. She was incredibly exhausted, stating that she couldn't walk anymore. She had been walking all day and was utterly drained. She didn't receive any help from her own kind. Instead, they beat her, calling her ugly and threatening to kill her if she didn't find the iron ore. She kept pleading, but the abuse didn't stop. They wanted to kill her right then and therefore being lazy. Unable to bear the sight, Lamthin picked up a rock and threw it at the head of one of the goblins. This action caused them to look at him with angry eyes. Lamthin explained that he wanted them to follow and help find the iron ore, not to fight. He said he would tell them what iron ore looks like, and that if they wanted to live in return, they should go to the valley ahead and bring back some iron ore. If they didn't listen, he would kill them right then and there. Lamthin took out his knife and glared at the 3 goblins with a terrifying expression. This threat terrified them. As they imagined him killing them with the iron weapon, they rushed off to find iron ore, not forgetting to threaten Lamthin with death if he failed to create weapons. Lamthin thought to himself that sooner or later they would kill him after obtaining iron tools. The task at hand was to become stronger. Looking at Gobu's information, the notification about mating with her to become a goblin god caught his eye. Lamthin decided it was time to do the things adults do. Seeing Gobu crying, Lamthin told her to stop. He sat down beside Gobu and asked her if she wanted to follow him. He promised to protect her, feed her, give her a warm home, and ensure no one would bully her. The girl was confused at these words, asking if he was telling the truth. Looking at the girl sincerely, Lamthin affirmed that everything he said was true. However, he was currently too weak to prevent further bullying. He needed to become stronger, and Gobu was the only one who could help him. The girl, confused, asked what she could do to help him become stronger. Lamthin felt a little embarrassed, but he said that if they mated, he would become stronger. This made the girl's face turn red. The girl looked at Lamthin with suspicion, asking if he was telling the truth. She said she had never tried this before. Lamthin was also a little flustered about bringing up this topic. He reassured her that everything would be fine and that he would help her if she wanted it. Without waiting for her response, Lamthin gently kissed her soft lips and then laid her down on the ground. The girl, embarrassed, agreed, saying she would bear his children. Then, naughty sounds echoed through the air. At the same time, notifications appeared one after another, informing him that mating had raised his current level to level 7, and the sound of upgrading echoed. The increase in level also increased his attributes. After a while, Lamthin's body began to change, his muscles becoming more defined. He was now level 7 with 40 HP, 10 strength, 6 defense, and a total strength of 65. Lam Thin was surprised at the change in his body, thought that if he continued like this, he could defeat the goblin leader. Lam Thin warmly stroked Gobu's head. He told her
Amazing. That was amazing.
He told her that she was his wife now, and he would protect her forever. The girl blushed and exhausted, thanked Lam Thin, calling him a good person. At this moment, a cry for help caught their attention. Looking in that direction, they saw a goblin running towards them in fear, followed by a large wolf. What caught Lam Thin's attention was the iron ore in the goblin's hand. He didn't expect to find iron ore here, but before he could get it, he had to deal with this problem first. Lam Thin immediately grabbed his knife. He asked Gobu to wait there for him. Gobu looked at Lam Thin with trust, reminding him to be careful. For Lam Thin, this wolf was a test of his strength. The wolf was about to catch the unfortunate goblin, who was desperately trying to escape. But Lam Thin suddenly appeared, wielding his sharp iron knife, charging directly at the large wolf. The fleeing goblin was completely taken aback by this action. Then it was filled with fear when it saw Lam Thin kill the wolf with one blow. In the goblin's eyes, Lam Thin had become a terrifying figure. When Lam Thin asked it to give him the iron ore, it immediately handed it over, overwhelmed with fear. Holding the iron ore in his hand, Lam Thin laughed with delight at the high quality of the ore. Now they needed more of this, and after they returned, he would make weapons for the goblins and the tribe. I hope you liked today's video, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button, as today's like goal is 500 likes. Comment part 2 below for the next part. Also consider subscribing and clicking the notification bell to get notified as soon as a new video drops in the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.